Well, here's some good news. I think I figured out a decent way to paint up that Demogorgon. Now, I understand why the quote-unquote painted one only had its mouth painted. This material just will not take paint very well. Now, this is actually quite common with inexpensive miniatures. The acrylic paint does have a little bit of give to it, but if the miniature is bendy enough, then the acrylic paint, even if you paint on a single layer, is still going to crack. Now, the second scenario is where the acrylic paint actually bonds to the primer harder than the primer bonds to the material itself, which leads to the sort of cracking off that you're seeing here, where the paint is bonded to the primer, but not to the material, so it just kind of flakes off. A solution for this actually came from the wargaming community, where a lot of people were actually using washes to paint a miniature rather than using traditional just painting methods. This was actually really interesting because a wash is going to be a much thinner, more pliable coat. So I figured I would try to paint the Demogorgon by giving it primer and then not using any other acrylic paint, but just using washes on that primer. In the end, I actually did end up using paint on the mouth area, because I figured that would be the one area that wouldn't have a lot of flexing and people wouldn't be directly touching it. So after giving it a thorough cleaning, I did my classic alcohol bath. This is just 70% rubbing alcohol. I like to use 90%, but this is what I had, and I think it works out just as well as the 90% stuff. Being careful not to actually touch the miniature, I affixed it with blue tack, or, mounting putty, onto a old bottle of paint, and I'm ready to prime it. Once again, I'm using the acrylic polyurethane Vallejo surface primer. I'm not using an airbrush. This can be used with an airbrush, but I'm just going to paint it on with a nice even coat, trying to be as thin as possible, yet still have coverage. Now, this is very important. Polyurethane primer needs a minimum of 12 hours to be completely cured. Just to be safe, I give this a full 24 hours, and it was okay. Honestly, Reaper Bones and the miniatures from the D&D board game are much more durable than this. As you can see when I'm giving it the thumbnail test, in certain areas you can see the primer flake off. That's no good. Obviously, other parts of the miniature, the primer stuck a lot better, but unfortunately, I think this is the best kind of primer you're going to get. Luckily, however, you can bend it, and there was no cracking of the primer. So the next step was just to use a bunch of inks on it, the strong tone and the red tone washes from Army Painter, and boom! You have a lovely looking Demogorgon, which is painted up very similarly to the artwork as well as the TV show monster itself. And while the durability is not quite up to my normal standards, as long as I baby this thing and I don't leave it in an unpadded case and I don't throw it around, it should stand up to most handling, and I will be able to use this in a game. So it's not perfect, but I think this method of using washes is going to be very useful, and the durability, I think, is the best you're going to get for this miniature. I know somebody else suggested that I might try the method of using certain paints. I know the actual polyurethane floor finisher was considered, the Army Painter dip. Someone specifically mentioned super glue, as well as baking soda, as a method to perhaps prime this guy without losing... you would lose detail with that, though. That'd be the only thing. But honestly, I think this method is the best one I have found so far for this particular sort of floppy material. If anybody else has any other methods, please let me know in the comments below.